Hello and welcome to the LovoCast, episode 3. Here we are with my good friend Dogma, all the way from the other side of the world. How you doing, Dogma?
G'day, mate. How you going?
How you doing? You can. Hey, how you doing?
Yeah. Oh, fuck off, mate. Yeah, I'm doing good. How are you?
No, nice to have you. So those the eagle-eyed viewers who are watching on something with a screen, which is most of them because it's a YouTube thing, will notice that we have a different setup now with a lovely watermark in the top corner from StreamYard. It's a program that I'm using as this is continuing to be an experiment in a fun little podcast format. So this is the next stage, and if this works, then I'll pay the money and we can get rid of all the is it mirrored, isn't it? Up in that corner, there's a StreamYard thing.
Yeah,
and I'll get the branding and stuff, and maybe you can help me with that. I don't know. What do you think of my branding? It's probably dog shit, right?
No, it's actually fine. I think the main thing about branding is it's just memorable, right? Like as long as people can identify it to you, that's the main thing.
Well, I'll have to do some market research when we get some polls. Like purple background with a silhouette F-15 on it. Who do you think that is?
Yeah,
I got some stick at the beginning for having that because that was before. No, it was because I was doing primarily like Hornet tutorials, or that was the aircraft I was using to do the tutorials. Was the Hornet, and my logo was an F-15. I just took a screenshot at what point, just completely unrelated, of an F-15. It's the C. I was flying it in DCS, probably single player. Took a little internal screenshot, and then when I was knocking together the DCS with Lovo stuff, I just looking for like, what can I have that's like not legally somebody else's, going through my screenshot folders. There it is, cut it out, stick it on, and the rest is history. That's how we got to where we are.
I like to think it's quite recognizable at this point, so that's the goal. Right?
Tell you what I did as well for the color scheme. I don't know if you're gonna laugh at this. Maybe in a second we'll come on to why I'm obviously deferring to you on all things sort of color scheming and branding. We'll come to that in a second. But the way I got like the sort of fuchsia-y purple color is I just went on you can get like complementary color calculators. If you picture the color wheel, you pick one bit on the color wheel and it is a tricolor or a quad color, like it'll give you the other ones that kind of go with it.
Yep.
So I just picked one of those and went with it.
Yeah,
that's basically what I did. Yeah. So let's bounce back in time a little bit. For the sake of anyone listening, why don't you tell us, let's start with how you and I know each other, and then you can share as much about yourself as you like in terms of why I'm deferring to you on color schemes and such.
Good thing. Yeah, I mean, it's I want to say a long story, but it's not. I joined the refugees like I think everyone else did, and I wanted to fly with some people, and you guys had a little thing going, so I joined. And it was good fun. I was actually saying to someone the other day, like when I first joined, I didn't think I wanted to do jets. I wanted to do helicopter stuff. That was my focus. I was like, really? Jets. Everyone does jets. Who cares about that? Knowing nothing about it, mind you. I'd played DCS on and off for 10 years at that point, but never really seriously got into it. And then you guys had the 4 Squadron. There's a plugin. A plug there for you. Come do it. But yeah, it's a little course, little training thing. I don't know what you want to call it. It's not really a course, but Anyway, we went through that and it was good fun. I didn't realize how much fun I was going to have doing it, and so I just joined the group that we've got on DCS Refugees and so started flying with you guys regularly, best I could anyway, given that I was obviously in Australia.
Yeah, so we normally fly at like 7 p.m. UK time, which is 7 p.m. GMT or UTC in the winter, and then we're +1 in the summer, so that sets us back to like 18 Zulu. What's that usually for you? How does that work out?
It depends on the time of year, but it's usually like the way I calculate it quickly is I go back 12 hours. So I go, so say it's 7 p.m. there, it'll be 7 a.m. here, and then you minus a couple of hours, depending on the time that we're currently in. So if daylight savings here, it'll be 2 hours, which is what it is now. And
so
if it's
our 7
not,
p.m. would be like 5 a.m. your time. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Jesus.
exactly. But yeah, most missions end up being around 4 a.m. So they can be a bit tricky to get to sometimes. But yeah, on one part of the year, it's a bit easier, which is nice.
Logistically, what's that like for you? Are you getting up and like sneaking out of bed with your partner and then like trying not to wake 5 kids and a dog, or is it easy?
Luckily, it's just the one partner, no kids or dogs. But we do live in a 1-bedroom apartment, so I do have to be quiet. But yeah, I just set the alarm early, try and go to bed early as much as I can, and get up. And
dedication, absolute.
It's worth it. It's good fun. It's not as bad as everyone makes it out to be. I always make a big deal, like, guys, it's so difficult, but it's not that bad.
Yeah. We never pestered you if you didn't turn up. We were like, oh, he pressed snooze and then it all went away.
There was a couple of times where I woke up and I was like, shit, I missed it. Like it's been like 2 hours since it started because my alarm didn't go off or something, or it went off. I just didn't pay attention. But yeah. Yeah, so doing that for a while now. I'm trying to remember when I joined, but I think it was 20. I want to say 2021, maybe 22, sometime around then. It's been longer than I think it has been. I think.
I think that's across the board. You look back on when you joined a server, and then it's years and years, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, obviously, as with most of the guys in the group, once Olympus started to come around,
I've got a surprise for you. You joined the 4 Squadron Discord in 2017. Oh no, that's Discord member since. Okay, it's not given. Normally it says like Discord member and then group member. For some reason, it's not giving me a group member. Let me try and find that while you're talking.
Sure, I can find it. Yeah, but excuse me. Excuse me. Yeah. So once Olympus came around, I put my hand up because IRL, my current role is user experience and user interface design, product design, a whole bunch of different similar things. So I do that for a living. I've been doing that for about 7 or 8 years now. Before that, I was a systems analyst. All of this for on and off for the Australian government. So I was in the government for about 12 years doing all of this stuff. And then a couple of years ago, I left to do private consulting. But we still do a lot of stuff for government. So it's more or less the same work.
Okay.
But yeah.
So what's user? What do you say? User experience design? Is that what you said?
Yeah. User experience UI. It's like a big umbrella kind of topic of software and web development, which essentially is obviously focusing on the front end, kind of the part of the product that the user is interacting with, and trying to make it a good experience, essentially. There's a lot of different resources and a lot of different, different sort of methodologies that are followed. But it's like a combination of lots of different things. It can be like user research, so like figuring out what people want out of a website or a product. If it currently exists, what are the current problems with it? How can we make it better? Things around accessibility for people with disabilities or mental impairment, stuff like that, making sure it's usable for them, to actually designing the UI of the particular thing is another part of it. Building prototypes to test with, helping developers build the product. There's it's a big sort of wide thing. And the user experience, UI, product design, they're all kind of smaller parts underneath the umbrella, I guess.
Okay, so it's not just like pen on paper or like a visual mock-up. You're actually getting in there and messing around with whatever's behind the scenes.
Yeah. I mean, my role is there's a part to play in every part. It's every step of the process when it comes to software development, but it's more front heavy because we do a lot of exercises and workshops and things up front to find out what people want and need, because the whole idea is that it's user centered, so it's user first methodology. So you don't just build a product and then hope that it kind of meets a user's needs. You go and talk to them first, ask what they need, figure out what they want, understand how they use the existing products or things that are similar, and then basically go away and kind of make up a plan of attack essentially for what the UI and the UX user experience is going to be. And user experience could be one page, it could be a whole website, it could be a piece of software, it could be, you know, small or large, really depends on what you're building. So yeah, that's kind of generally
And
speaking.
I think it's
All of it.
it's maybe we just don't ask this question enough, but it was shocking to me how well rounded the group of us were, including yourself, when it came to making Olympus. Like, obviously, they're the people who are really in the mix of making it. Like, you know, Tony and your Veltro, who were actually doing the creation, and a couple of other people pitched in on that as well. But because it happened within this group of friends on Discord who flew DCS, we found that, and you were kind enough to, like you say, put your hand up. But you know how. Yeah, my mic does weird things sometimes. I don't know. How lucky we were to have someone who knows about that side of it. Like it really, I was just like, wow, okay, you know. And I think it has made a big difference with Olympus. You know, if you compare it, not that we are in necessarily competition with other mods like is it Liberation or Briefing Room, but you know, naturally, I think we're in that. They're our peers to some degree. Like, I think that we do stand out for an attractive and easy to use product. And people have said, "Oh, you know, thank God there's these tooltips on the side." And you know, no one's gone like, "What the hell does this button do?" You know, So one, it's incredible that, you know, we just happen to have a UI designer next to the adjacent to the product. Let me check my connections, I guess, because this pisses me off.
It's all good. I'll fill the air. Yeah, no, it's I often describe Olympus to other people because it comes up in work conversations and other things with friends, and I sort of say, hey, you know, I built this thing with some mates of mine, and I always make the point of saying, and somehow we managed to, like, everyone in the group kind of had some specialty that kind of really we had everyone we needed to build an actual, like, good thing out of this. You know, we had obviously Veltro, who was amazing developer, really knows his stuff. I put my hand up for UI design. We had people who knew what they were doing with Lua. We had, you know, the ultimate cheerleader yourself, and even a lawyer. You know, like saying we had everybody, right?
Yeah.
So, like,
yeah. Is it CV worthy? I know you're obviously professional and you're in the business. It's not like you've been in the business for a while, but is it something that you could feasibly turn around and say, "Oh, and I made this," or "and I was involved in this project"? You know.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about doing that. It's a tricky one because it's a bit hard to describe it. Yeah, yes, the end goal, I think, will eventually be to sort of say, yeah, by the way, I made this, because the stuff I usually work on is web-based. So they're usually websites, intranets, you know, stuff you log into.
Do like, use the technology. Here we are. Look.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk us through any of it? It's here.
Yeah. So this is the first sort of. I mean, Olympus is running inside a browser, but there's also a client. So it's sort of the first piece of sort of more official software, I guess you could say, that I've done.
Typically, I guess the server's not running; it's doing the connecting loop. Let me look at that.
I guess that's a good segue, which is that when the project started, I think there was already a direction that we were heading with the UI of Olympus, and I didn't want to rock the boat too much. You know, I understood that it wasn't my thing to come in and like tell everyone, oh, it needs to be this, it needs to be that. I know everyone was very open to that, to the feedback that I was giving, which is awesome. It's part of the reason why I think the project went so well, and we're all still friends afterwards, which is probably, you know, a risk when you do stuff like this.
It's true. Yeah, it was remarkably. I mean, we're not the softest, most sort of deferring group of people, are we? Like, we do like razz on each other and take the piss out of each other's ideas. So you're right. They could have been bruised egos. But I guess, well, one, we'd known each other for a while, which doesn't make a difference, and two, I guess I don't know, mature enough to know when to poke fun and when to be serious.
Yeah, but anyway, I guess long story short, we ended up going with a particular direction with Olympus. I think primarily guessing where or how we think it would work the best. And now that we've had a chance to use it for a long time, we've got lots of feedback from people. I'm already thinking of the next step, like what are we going to do with the next? And there's so many parts of Olympus that I'm, sort of almost slapping myself in the head, going, "Why didn't I think of doing this originally?" But we just didn't have that experience with using it, and giving it to people to understand it. And now that we do, it's like cool. There's lots of different ways where it could be even better. So
like it needed that sort of feedback, that like live test, as it were, because we couldn't really, aside from the few of us, like you described a process where you'd go to the users and find out what they wanted and stuff, whereas we kind of had to do it the opposite way. We had a product, maybe we were the users, because that is one of the sort of schemes for Olympus, is we made it for ourselves. It just so happens that we released it. So was that how you went about it, or did you try and think about how the greater world would look at it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to it, but essentially, yes, that we were the users in that case. I was operating under the assumption that kind of we were the main use case for it. But that's the thing, as it progressed, as it grew, we added more stuff to it. We changed kind of, the approach to like what the focus areas would be, or at least, sort of refine them a bit. And then when people got their hands on it, some of the stuff that they were telling us they're using it for is, outside of the realm of, I guess, what we were going to use it for, which I think is where the interesting feedback has come from. And my own chance to play with it and do some actual scenarios as well once it's been out has given me a good chance to sort of, say to myself, what's an even better way or easier way of doing the exact same thing. But yeah, ideally we could have, if this was an official project, if this was something that was funded, we could go to the community first and sort of refine that process a bit. But I think this was meant to be a bit of, I guess, a bit of fun while we do something that we think will be really cool that people will like. So it wasn't, we weren't taking it super seriously, I think, which is definitely great, because I don't want to go to work, come home, and then work again. It's meant to be
fun. Do you
fun,
feel like we valued you appropriately? Because from my perspective, what usually happened is that there was a feature that Veltro was working on, and he'd do his best, and then kind of show it, and then you'd kind of go away for a couple of days, and then come back with better looking versions, and then pretty much to my perspective, we just took it, like, because, well, yeah, you know what you're doing, that is better. And there's probably lots of reasons why it's better that aren't apparent to us, so let's use it. Did you feel like you had to explain some stuff to us, like plebs who didn't understand UI, or do you feel like we just kind of like took you as an expert?
I think for the most part, like everyone was really, there's one of the things I comment on that I think I really appreciated about the project, which is that everyone who was an expert in their particular thing, like people listened to them and gave them, their kind of respect that's needed. And you don't often get that sometimes, especially as a UX UI designer. I think it's because, and I've always tried to figure this out, it's been a long time, but I've always tried to figure out why it is that no one will have an opinion on how you've written the code unless you're a developer, but everyone and their dog wants to tell you that they don't like the color or they don't like where that button is. UI and UX is like, it's a good thing. Everyone can have an opinion, which is great. But like, everyone, I guess there's a risk there of the attitude of being like, oh, it's just like visuals, and people can kind of accidentally think they may know more than they do and stuff like that, which leads to a lot of, yes, the expert is telling me something, but I disagree because of a silly reason that they don't even know they don't know, and you kind of like have to argue with them a lot. I didn't really have to do any of that with you guys, which the point I'm trying to make. Sometimes that does happen. You spend most of your time as a UX designer trying to convince everyone else you know what you're talking about, which is not always a pleasant experience. But not with you guys, which was good. Part of the reason why the project was still fun at the end of the day, which is good. But like, I want people to ask questions. I want everyone to be involved in the process. That's one of the creeds of UX design, is that everyone should have a say. It's just, at the end of the day, the UX designer knows how to take that information and kind of, work with it in a way that's going to please everybody and not just maybe one group of people or,
It's
one
a classic
person.
thing about management, isn't it? You should try and you should talk about outcomes and objectives rather than necessarily specific actions. Like, I want a thing that would work for the majority of the public and needs accessibility options for the colorblind, and it should show map data, and then go and make that happen, rather than, no, I don't want that map, make it, this color's nicer, and then you're going, well, you just told me a bunch of other things that's not going to work for someone with a certain kind of color blindness, and
exactly
blah blah blah.
Like, you pretty much nailed it. Yeah, it's like, at the end of the day, like, there are decisions that you make as a UI UX designer that if I were to sit down and explain to you all the reasons why I did that, we'd be here for an hour. I just need you to trust what I'm saying. It's not the end of the world. Like, it's one of those death by 1,000 cuts thing, right? One minor UX whatever or UI issue isn't going to end the world, but when you have a lot of them, it adds up, and it's kind of, it can go south pretty quickly. I think people underestimate. I think people are starting to get it now, but a couple of years ago, people really underestimated how important, something as simple as a button placement or color could be. It can really make a difference to whether or not the product is usable, because it's all about perception. If someone can't naturally figure out what to do just by looking at whatever they're looking at, then you sort of failed.
For example, so can you see what I'm sharing? I presume you're watching me play around with Olympus while we go. Yep. This is the unit. This is the create unit window, and here we've got the coalition changer, which I click on, and it changes color, and the entire thing, the relevant buttons, change color. However, I can right click and go to neutral. So from what you've said, I think it's entirely intuitive to click that, but we've got the right click. Do you think the right click fits sort of what you described as intuitive? Considering, I mean, no. I will point out on the right hand side, it says mouse 1 toggle blue red, mouse 2 set neutral.
It does, but you have to tell someone what a button does through some other means other than the button itself, then you run into a problem. That's like, I don't want to say it's a rule, but generally speaking, people should look at something and know how to use it. The toggle, I'm not sure what the history with that was. I was a little absent near the end of Olympus's development, so there's a few UI things that I think went under the radar. But again, the product is still great. Like, people, still the decisions that were made while I wasn't there are all sound, and it's all just fine.
Yeah,
it's all going to work.
Control Shift VX2 to change the neutral, is it?
Exactly. Yeah, it could have been a lot worse. But that button, for example, we're sort of playing around with a new UI update. I don't know how much we want to say, just because we haven't really even announced it yet or anything. We're working on it. We're literally in the code, but it's still in sort of I guess you could say, a testing phase and a development phase. But as a part of that upgrade, for example, I've changed that button so that when you left click, it cycles through all of the different states one by one, and then cycles back to the beginning again. So there's no right click anymore. It's just left click, blue, neutral, or blue, red, neutral.
Well,
and then back to the beginning again.
Take that as an example then.
Yeah. But like I said, it's a little thing, right? But at the end of the day, we had people coming in saying, how do I make the unit neutral? Even though there is a tooltip.
Well, yeah, neutral is important for Scenic AAA, isn't it? If you splash down a couple of these guys, grab them, and then you've got over here, you've got shoot without aiming, like barrage fire, and then just miss.
Yeah, and like this whole process, I know, it's a little bit confusing because of the logic behind it with DCS. The way we get it to work means it kind of has to be a little bit complicated, but ideally in the future, there are ways to make the experience better for people whilst kind of hiding a lot of that complexity. And like, there are ways that I can think of where that system could be even simpler than it is now, we do all of the crazy stuff on the back end, but on the front end, people get something easy to use. So little refinements can really add up to make stuff work. That's basically UX in a nutshell. If you lots of little things that at the end of the day make something enjoyable or fun to use.
Were you in the decisions for like, because looking at this, trying to have your sort of eye or an eye to your work, we've got blue and red and grey, but we've got squares for aircraft, we've got triangles for air defense, we've got diamonds for at least enemy ground. Is that still true for?
I think the shapes are side agnostic, so they're not. They don't change.
We've got diamonds for ground, circles for rotary.
Yep.
Was this something you were? Was this something that you sort of dealt with, or something that you imposed?
Well, when we did it initially, we did have a rudimentary NATO symbol system, which I think is what a lot of people would have expected. I think my main concern is that I wanted to keep it really simple, and I didn't want, both from a development standpoint and also from a user standpoint, people to have to learn the NATO symbology back to front to be able to use the product, which for some people is their forte, which by all means, like, I'm impressed that you know what all those icons mean, because I only know like some of them, what some of them mean. But poor Velcher, having to make all of those icons and maintain them. I know he's had a little library, but it didn't look very good, and we wanted it to, we wanted the software to look and work in a way that was impressive, and those icons just weren't doing it for me. And at the same time, we wanted people to be able to look at it and go, okay, well, that's a plane, that's a whatever. So we've come up with a simplified system here, just to help people use it. Having said that, the thought process is, well, if we can do something cool with NATO symbols in the future, we can make that a toggleable thing. But it's just, like I said, it's a lot of, one small decision can have a lot of run-ons, and I think that one, for me anyway, had a lot of implications of all different unit types and how we're going to render that, display it. Do we need to, make all those icons? Where do they come from? Will people know just by looking at them what they are? That kind of thing. So,
well, that's it. We've spoken about this previously, actually, on the podcast, and I was like, it's a good system if you know what it is.
Yeah,
they're not all intuitive by any means. So, I agree. It would be good to have it as an option, but it would be quite the challenge or the hurdle for people who. I only learned really. I'm in an armor group, and we did a map course, like the session, a week or two back, and I got my head around it a little bit. But prior to that, I would have been in that same boat. I'd be going like, I'd have to like memorize where I put things because I wouldn't know from the look of them what they are.
It's like, like I know for a fact, if it's a square, it's a ground unit that is known, but like from then on, it's like, cool, what all these lines mean. I don't know, what's going on. So yeah, it's it could be tricky. And I think, like for me, I think at the end of the day, I came in and kind of, put my foot down and said, hey guys, I think we really need to
I think Velcher was keen on the NATO, wasn't he? Because it was like, it's a system, it exists,
yeah.
But I agree with you.
Lots of good arguments for why we should have done it, but at the same time, lots of good arguments as to why we went with something a little bit more simple. And I've since played a few RTS games as well. Like I got Command Modern Operations a little while ago as well, and a few others, just to kind of try and dive back into the genre again to get my head around what other people are doing, and what the standards are and stuff like that. And there are some. I think the system we've got works, even if it's not ideal at the moment. I still think it works pretty well, and I think like we'll definitely want to explore different options in the future. But it's one of those things where
well, if you're in the Olympus Discord and you want to yell at someone about the UI, this is your boy.
DM me. No, please don't. Put it in the suggestions. I think there's a suggestion section, isn't there?
There is a suggestion section, yeah. Is that what you'd recommend? I mean, to be honest, it's probably the least commented on, one of the least commented on aspects There we go. One of the least commented on aspects, in my opinion, from what I've seen.
Which is a good thing.
Which probably means, you know, I mean, if there's no smoke kind of job, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But generally speaking, we know we've done a good job if no one says anything about it. It means it's invisible, which is what you want. If someone comes in going, how the fuck do I do this? I don't know where the buttons are. What's happening? Why is this menu here? You know, you got a problem.
You could make the best program in the world, couldn't you? But if I, as a user, log on and I can't figure out how to start it, then it's kind of all for naught, really, isn't it? If you want users to use it, if you only expect trained individuals to use it, as one thing. But if you want someone to be able to download it, pick it up, and play it, then it's a bit more important.
Exactly. Yeah. And at the end of the day, like, DCS is a game, right? So it's not like they're industry professionals out there using it. I mean, there might be, but the main player base is going to be gamers, you know. So it doesn't.
Yeah.
We don't want it to be.
We've had 2 people join the Discord and ask about if they can use it for like wargaming. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I briefly did. Yeah, I read that.
That's one of the most surprising of all the people coming in, like with different use cases, and I've used it for this, I use it for that. Usually it's like, oh great, yeah, you know, that's what big groups making big missions happen, people doing training on as an individual, like, yeah, great, totally expected that. But then people have seen it clearly, it's almost like they've seen it separate to DCS. Like DCS was the afterthought. We had to explain to them, like, I mean, you could kind of, but then you're dealing with DCS's AI, which is you know, not the best. And they, from the conversation, it was pretty clear that they weren't coming in as a DCS player. They were coming in as someone maybe played whatever that game you just mentioned. Was it Combined Ops? Command Ops, or that the war game. That I played that before,
I'm not too sure. Yeah, what? Because you'd think if they were into that stuff, they'd go play those games. And why would Olympus, as you said, pique their interest? They didn't know what DCS was. It was interesting. Yeah, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, that was I think at its heart, and this is why I think people are just disappointed about Combined Arms and the state it's in, is because if you look at, I mean, let me go back to, because I'm gesticulating to a shared screen. Is it just simple as pressing that? Yeah, okay, we're back on Olympus. Like, if you look at that and go, all right, yeah, we could set up a whole war, I could see how that would be quite enticing. You know what I mean? Like, I haven't played Command Ops, I have played War Game, and it's a much smaller map, and there's all these mechanics about points and stuff for spawning things, and whilst it's quite pretty, you know, if I was in DCS now, I could zoom right into things and all that stuff. Like, if you want to play a war here, there's not a lot of other games that lets you do that. And I mean, technically on DCS, you could have a war up here or up here. It just wouldn't look very good on the ground textures. But I could kind of see why someone would find that quite interesting, but then find that the Combined Arms stuff, like, you can jump into any tank, but it's kind of like you're not in a tank, are you? You know, you're just kind of like driving a go-kart around, and things shoot through buildings, and really it's like often who has the slightly larger number or which unit sees which unit first kind of decides the entire battle.
Yeah, look, I think looking at it from the big picture, you sort of think, oh yeah, I could use this as like a, you know, an entire war simulator, or, you know, some kind of tactical thing, or even just like, you know, I want to watch planes I like fly around and do stuff, you know, in 3D, which I think a lot of these sort of war games don't do, as you said, unless they're sort of a bit smaller scale. But yeah, you're like at the end of the day, it's DCS. You know, it's only got so much going on under the hood for a particular purpose, and what we're sort of doing with this tool and what other people want to do with it kind of falls outside the umbrella of the reason it was made. I guess it's just a nice extra thing. But if people want to do that, like, I suppose they can. It's just, the DCS AI is what it is, and, you know, they're not going to be super smart about stuff or anything. But
yeah, I'm looking forward to if and when we get formations for ground units. because
Yeah.
you got a follow command for air units. If I come across to, we've got I think a crashed F-15 here, but if I right click on there, you can say follow and you can choose a thing. We did a mission once where what the intent was to be a huge ground battle, and we were all in like tanks and armored personnel carriers and infantry fighting vehicles and stuff. We were like 1 to 10 between human and AI, with the intent being that, like, if this is me here in a tank and I've got a bunch of AIs, and I would go on to the radio, which would be to the Olympus player, and say, like, Tango 1-1, move out northeast line abreast, and I would start moving over there, and the Olympus person would do something like that.
Yeah.
And make it work. And it was a good test because we quickly got overwhelmed and it went to shit, and we realized that that's not really a thing you can do with maybe more than 2 or 3 human players and their sort of tank squadrons. But would you able to right click on there and say follow in line abreast, then it becomes a bit more viable, and it kind of, you could have like 4 or 5 people playing ground ops in a large air war and kind of make it work, I think.
Yeah, it's I think that my favorite thing about Olympus is that, like, the ideas that people come up with of ways to use it to make the game more interesting is just kind of, I mean, it's just unique. Like, I ran a session for an Australian group a little while ago, and it was like a members night or whatever. There was just people just hopped on and just wanted to fly around and do something. And I just said, pick whatever plane you want, just tell me what you're doing and we can do it. And they all took off. A couple people doing strike, some people doing SAM stuff like seed, some people doing cap. And I just acted sort of as a global GCI and just said, oh, this flight, there's something over here. This flight, you got this thing coming over here. And it was just it's just super breezy for everybody. And everyone had a great time.
Around in the mission editor. Is it just slots and go, right?
And if I knew that the person was a bit newer or maybe didn't know what they were doing, as much as the other guys, I spawned a plane with no missiles, or set it to hold fire or something so that they wouldn't die, and therefore they could have a good time, and and just kind of come up with interesting scenarios within the game. I spawned a C-130, neutral C-130, and said, "How there's this plane coming through. Got a bogey, bullseye, whatever. Go check it out. VID, tell me what it is," kind of thing, and so they could do something a bit different. So yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's just for me, it's the thing that I love about Olympus is just kind of possibilities it opens up, and I hope that as we add more features to it, eventually, it'll get even more exciting. I think some of the cool ideas we've had are, if we can do them, really make all of that even easier to do, especially at like a large scale.
Yeah, I think we've slowed down a little bit naturally because we've gotten past that first hurdle of release, and we're enjoying the game. We're enjoying DCS again for a little bit, and we've always had other projects on the go as well, and they've kind of taken a bit more. At least speaking for myself, and like I know, like Tony and I are working on syllabus restructures for this and that, and I think that's fine. Like, I think you can't, like, we're lucky in that we are, when this isn't a job, we're not getting paid to do it. We're not given objectives, and you got to do X by this amount of time, which really was what makes it work. I mean, we'd hate it probably more if that was a lifestyle, but the fact that we can pick and choose, we probably will have to, like, focus ourselves in again a little bit, but it's kind of like that sort of like freedom of expression in a way. We can just, I fancy doing a bit of this project this week, a bit of that project this week, rather than being like, okay, we want to get this out by Christmas, so let's sort of knuckle down and make it work.
Yeah, it's definitely, like you said, it's good to have a break. I think we worked on it for so long, and at the end, especially at the end, I think people put in quite a bit of time leading up to Christmas. So it's good we've had a chance to kind of decelerate a little bit. And like you said, yeah, it's supposed to be a fun thing. We're not getting paid. We don't want to be paid. It's just kind of, something we do for fun and something that we personally are interested in having, so the stuff we're going to add is going to be stuff that we want. And yeah, we'll kind of do it as it comes, I guess. But yeah, I mean, having said that, I know Veltro can't keep away from Olympus if you tried. And I'm sort of the same lately as well. I've gotten in and I'm actually helping out with the front end code a little bit. And like, it's one of those, I'll just do a little bit more. I'll just do a little bit more. And then 3 hours later, you're like, okay, I think I need to stop. Because you just get so into it.
Well, better than the other way around, I suppose.
Yes, for sure. It would be terrible if it was a drag.
To snap back a little bit, you were kind of referring to this a little bit, so I think this is one of the things that I actually wanted to have you talk about a little bit. Most of the people I know who play DCS are either European or North American.
Yep.
And many fewer people. I think I know about 3. Pretty much all from the refugees who are from Australia. So really the question is what is it like being an Australian person who likes DCS? And I mean, I guess that's the question, like, because you've already spoken about, getting up early to fly with us, and we didn't touch on it, but we have sort of gone the other way a little bit, so that we've gotten up a little bit early for you. But, what is it like being in that community, or the lack of community, and having to live with that, as it were?
Well, I'll choose my next words carefully because, what communities there are in Australia. I don't want to get on anyone's shit list. Not to say that they're terrible. Everyone I've flown with has been very nice and very.
But there are communities.
Yes, there are. But just before I found refugees, I was trying to find one. I think the Apache was coming out. I think that was around the time, or it was coming out like a year or something. But I was super keen for it. It was like the thing I was looking forward to the most out of anything. And so I really wanted, and it was obviously the Apache is the 2-seater. So I wanted to find someone to fly with. And I've been playing single player on and off for a long time. So I went looking for Australian communities, thinking, it should be easy. There's tons of Aussies. We all like our, boats and planes and jets and cars and stuff.
You fly the Hornet, surprising, right? Or is it the Super Hornet now?
Super Hornet, I believe, from memory. And the F-35. We've got a few F-35s as well. But yeah, I was surprised by the lack of options. There weren't that many. There were a few, and I've tried a few, and I found 1 or 2 that I like. But it comes down to the people, right? Like, you got to want to fly with those people every week. And I say this with no intention to pat anyone on the back, but the DCS refugees is by far the best community I've found on DCS. Including some European and American stuff. Because once I reached the bottom of the barrel with Australian stuff, I went, okay, well, I've got no choice. I better go look for something else. And it's just I'm sure people can relate to the frustration of finding, a group that kind of fits your needs, what you want to do with them, the right personalities that kind of line up with yours. Like, I'm personally not super into the milsim side of things. I know that we as a group aren't really. We like to do things by the book if we can, but not take it super seriously. We do it because it's fun
and actions, isn't it? It's about how you fly to fly well, rather than how you are outside of that and some sort of hierarchy or.
Like let's learn how to fight well so we can shit talk while we do it. Like, that's kind of the attitude, I guess. At least for me. So yeah, finding a group that kind of met those requirements was a bit challenging. In Australia, some of the bigger communities are more focused on, they're either more public focused, so there's less of what we do, which is sort of the more focused kind of group stuff. They just sort of, there's a server and you just go and play on it, and you just message a channel if you want to fly with someone, as opposed to like organized events. And
so there's one step above like jumping in the back of someone's Apache or something and saying, "Hey, can I fly with you?" It's just it's that, but in a Discord rather than in the chat in the game.
Yeah, pretty much. And then the other communities that do exist, they generally have, requirements to join. You have to know a certain amount or know how to fly a particular plane enough. And then when you do join, it's all very, depending on what their focus is. It could be not be quite what you're looking for, or it could be. I won't name names, but I joined a group a while ago, and it seemed very promising. They sort of knew what they were talking about, and it seemed promising. But then when they went to do missions, they did missions realistically, in the sense that they flew around for 2 hours, did nothing, and then came home.
Right.
So like doing combat air patrol, but nothing ever showed up. Things like that, where I was kind of like, okay, like, and then they would get a little bit cranky with you if you didn't do the right thing. If you had a formation, it's like, yeah, thank God I'm in formation while we're doing nothing. Like that's really, it was kind of that kind of thing.
That can be an extension of the rivet counter in a way, can't it? Because we know what line abreast is, about a mile and a half off to one side, but it's also like plus or minus 1,000 feet up or down, plus or minus 2,000 feet forward and aft. Like sometimes people go, that's line abreast, you got to be there, not realizing that like there is a bubble. Yeah. And not even that, like sometimes people don't realize, like if we're flying and like we're gonna turn that way, I might tuck in a little bit so that when we get out, we're line abreast again. You can do stuff, and sometimes people don't. Sometimes people are so rigid on, I read it this way once.
Yeah, I mean, I don't love the idea of getting reamed in front of a bunch of people for getting something wrong in a video game. Which, or like not reamed, but in like people being like, oh, you got to work on the formation stuff, and then you're looking at what they're doing, and you're like,
you got the curse of knowledge. It's because you've been in 4 Squadron, you've learned how to do it well, and then other people trying to tell you how to do it wrong, and you're like, fuck you. That's what happened.
Yeah, I mean, but it has been good though, moving around, because then you get to see the different ways people do the same thing, which is another interesting way of looking at stuff. The names that people call one thing, or how they do a particular, thing that you already know how to do. Like I've done in the group I'm in currently, they're quite laid back, and they kind of hit the sweet spot, I guess. I wish they're a little bit more active. They have one event a week, and they don't really spend much time in the Discord doing much else. But they're kind of my reasonable hour mission scratch, like type thing. I don't have to wake up at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
But they have different names for the same turns that we have. So they do the exact same formation turns, but they're all just called something else. And so it was like there's like an extra layer now though. When I fly with them, I have to remember the right term for them, because it might be like, I'm trying to think. It's been a while since I've actually flown with anybody, to be honest. But
yeah, like we might need to change, to be honest with you, because I've not come across a group yet that calls it what we call it. It might just be easier that we change.
Yeah, maybe. Like for example, like a nav turn. These guys call it a 45 to the left or something like that, or a what was it?
Is it like delay 45? I've heard delayed
45.
Delay 45 quite a lot.
Yep, that's the one. But it's all sort of the same. It's all the same stuff. It's just done slightly differently or called something else, and so you kind of get that exposure to that way you can sort of go, okay, cool, I know the general gist of what it is I'm supposed to do, and that way you can kind of be a bit more flexible, which is fun. That's a nice way to look at it as well. But yeah, I mean, it has been difficult finding a good Australian server, and I'm not too sure why. That's not to bag on any of them that are out there. I think lots of people are very happy in the servers that they are a part of in Australia, but me personally, I think what I was looking for was fulfilled by the refugees pretty well, and 4 Squadron and 767 and stuff. And that's the reason why I continue to wake up at 4 a.m. every now and then. It's because it's the people more than anything.
We should probably. We've been mentioning 4th Squadron and stuff for a little bit. So just for the sake of anyone listening, so the Refugees is a Discord group that are based around DCS. I started making videos, and some of it was about like formations and stuff, and then I realized that that's a better way to fly, and a few people who actually cared about that, because not everyone has to care about that. We ended up putting together a syllabus basically based off of the available NATOPS that we called 4th Squadron, which is an RAF training squadron. And then as that progressed, we decided that, right, well, we're going to call people who graduate, because if 4 squadrons are training, well, then you go off to like an operational conversion unit, and then eventually a frontline squadron. We picked 767 basically because of its cool liveries. Because 767, nice. You know, if you listen to this, like look up 767 Squadron, and they got a Phantom and I think a Harrier with a flying yellow eagle with talons out. It looks cool. So it ended up being like I've only really spent time in 2 groups, and maybe you can expound on this a little bit, but no one seems to have gone as in depth into like a flight school as we have.
Yes, I would agree with that. All the groups I've joined, and to be fair, it's only been a handful, but the ones that sort of, you know, make you go through the training or whatever they have available, were either they haven't gone into much detail. Like it has been, in terms of like formations and sort of basic tactics like BFM and ACM and things like that. I'd say it's comparable, but there's a whole other side that they just haven't even touched, which is all of the extra fun stuff that we do, like for example the low level navigation. You know, there's a bit around different strike tactics and stuff like that we do. You know, even just emergency procedures and things like that. You know, that's some of the stuff that I still use every now and then. You know, be flying around, I get hit, and I go, "Oh, I'm actually not dead for once." Usually, DCS, you get hit, and you're just dead.
Yeah, this is.
You know,
I don't think I'm sharing any
it's
inside baseball here, and you might not have seen this yet because I know you've sort of had other things going on. But we're revamping the syllabus, and this is what it looks like now. So, like, we have 3 stages. We have 4 Squadron, and now we have the OCU, and we have 767. So there's actual lessons in 767 now. But you'll see there's 10 lessons in like the basics.
Yeah,
and it is pretty much all ripped right out of the NATOPS, at least like the first 2 sections, and that is, I guess that's one of the areas that I'm surprised we're the only people who do it, because the Americans release the NATOPS, you know, quote unquote, publicly. I don't know if there's like it's supposed to like export them or whatever, but they're freely available from the official websites, and they're basically the basic training syllabus for the US Navy aviators. Like, why wouldn't you just take that? You know, unless you are actually from some Air Force and you do know better.
Yeah.
So we've got 10 basic, and then another 10. One of them is just like, you know, this is what OCU is. So the first one doesn't count. And then we've got another 10 sort of advanced, as it were. And it flowed together so like nicely out of the syllabus that the US Navy published. And I think as we were doing it, we realized that a lot of it is quite actually good fun, and you do learn a lot of virtual airmanship that, as you said, like quite often saves your ass or lets you do things that seem like getting somewhere on time, you know, even if you have got waypoints and INS.
We did a low level strike mission in one of the Australian groups a little while ago, and it was at night, or at least dusk, and it was like a low level ingress to attack an airfield with a bunch of AAA around it, and I was the only one on the approach and on the way out moving. Everyone else flew in straight, dropped the bombs, and I was like wiggling side to side. As soon as the guns started coming up, it was like, cool, I'm gonna go side to side, up and down. You know, I'm gonna make myself
not easy to hit. Please.
Yeah, and everyone else just sort of went, oh, oh, I got hit. I'm going down. Oh, I'm like, what? It's because you're flying straight and level over an airfield.
I know.
And there's AAA everywhere. Like, what do you? But that's the
Shouldn't
thing. It's the
laugh
little
really,
things like that.
because you don't know until you
Where,
know, do you? It's one of those things.
no,
Like
I don't.
I learned a lot. Like, and you do learn a lot, and you've passed this, and you've been.
I've
an
learned that
instructor.
lesson the hard way. I know that lesson for a reason.
Exactly. We've tried it and tested it, and confirmed it, and that is part of what the later stuff is on this, isn't it? Stuff that we've actually worked out ourselves, because there's a limit to what they'll share, even in the US Navy.
Yeah, and that's like the fun. For me, it's the fun part, right? It's like you learn all this interesting knowledge, and then you go and try and apply it in the game, and you do it, and it doesn't work, and you go, "What the fuck?" And then you try it again a bunch of times, and you figure out, "Oh, okay, you do it this way, it works better," or we'll try something this week, and then for me, that's the stuff that makes it entertaining and fun. Like I like to learn, like
Absolutely.
and to
agree,
like practice stuff. I find it a bit, like I said, dull to go into a mission and it's like, cool, fly to A to B and then back again, and it's like, okay, but we didn't do anything. Like it's not like we even did tactics on the way there that were interesting or something, that was worth the time. It was just and I mean, some people like that, and that's fine. But for me, and I feel like most of the people in our little group, we want to get involved and learn more about it, and do something that not everyone else gets to do, which I think is the unique thing about it that I find.
I think there's so many, to sort of a small segue back to talking about different groups, and you've obviously been through groups. I've basically had experience of 2 largely, and then sort of coming into a third one now, which we'll come into in a second. But it's interesting. You never know when you step into that group, like where you sit. You kind of got to like shut up for a little bit, and just listen.
Yeah.
Because maybe these guys are shit hot, or maybe they don't care. Maybe they're just like flying around doing BFM and having a laugh. But it's always interesting to see where you stack up. But more that there's these bubbles, like you don't know what's going on, how many DCS discords there are, where people might be doing stuff. Like the little tools that we found, and some of which we've made, which kind of goes to the point really. What does the DCS community have? Like there could be another DCS group full of really, really expert coders who've made an even better version of Olympus, and they're sitting there going, "Oh, that's pretty good, but it's not as good as what we've got." Or people could have amazing training syllabus, or amazing a really, really good way of getting people into a mission. Because sometimes that's the problem. Sometimes a group has tons of people, and every slot's always filled. Sometimes, like the refugees, there's a little bit like that, where there's a really good group of people who like to chat, and it's a really active Discord, but people don't tend to fly so much anymore. And we've tried different ways of getting people really engaged with the DCS side, and we borrowed something from a different group. The second group I'm in, Border Zone, had a good way of arranging missions that made it very clear what's on when. And made it very clear where you talk about it and ask questions. And we borrowed that, and to some degree it's been successful. But there's all these bubbles in DCS. Like you don't know how good the next group is, if they're doing something really well, or maybe you're doing something really well and you don't realize because you're growing up in it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think that it's one of the few, I'd say, downsides of DCS is just how as you said, like pocketed the community is. You've got all the imagine if you're getting to DCS today, right? You go, oh, this game looks really cool. I see all these videos on YouTube of people flying with their friends and doing stuff. I'll go do that too.
Grim Reapers, get that done.
Yep, exactly. But then you realize, like I do, that none of my IRL friends give anywhere near of a shit about aviation.
No, you're now the plane guy. Congratulations, or girl, plane person.
Yep, the plane friend. But and then you go online to try and find other people to fly with, and it's like, I don't. I wouldn't. Honestly, it's difficult to figure out where to start, I guess, unless you're, as you said, part of maybe the YouTuber you watch has a community. Maybe you start there. But it's like it doesn't feel like there's somewhere to go, where you can. I know there's the forums and stuff like that, but I don't know who uses forums regularly in the year of our Lord
No, I've never
2024.
used. I've hardly ever used the DCS forums. Like, it's just
No,
not nice to look at, is it?
no. But I don't know, that could be a side effect of Discord as well. Like, I think I've heard that same thing said about a lot of things, though. When it comes to Discord, just because Discord is a bit like that. You know, you have your little communities, and it can be hard to see what's going on. Outside of that,
now, but when I was starting out, Discord wasn't searchable. Like, you can't just, they had to get invite. You can't just like go on to like Discord, whatever website, and then search for DCS, and you see all the DCS forums in a list, and you can, like, I don't know, pick the biggest one or the one in your country. Like, that wasn't a thing. I don't know if it is now, but that's one of the barriers, I think, because the communities, I think, mostly exist in DCS. I've not had anyone saying, "I'll use DCS." We use fucking MSN Messenger. You know, I've not heard
TeamSpeak.
Yeah, I've not. I mean, TeamSpeak is obviously a thing, but even like the Armor group I'm in that uses TeamSpeak, like, they still like coordinate and stuff in Discord.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, I'm sounding old now, but times have changed. I think Discord is a great platform that does replace forums and things like that. I think before you would sort of probably do this over a forum or some kind of, you know, you see an advertisement somewhere for a TeamSpeak server and maybe you join that or something. But yeah, look, I think Discord's great. It's just, it's like finding the right groups. It legitimately took me a while to find 4 or 5 that were in Australia. I mean, that were like, okay, I could give this a go. And some of them I haven't proceeded with. Some of them I've tried. But I've yet to find something like DCS Refugees in Australia, which is a shame. But, you know,
I think you should start poaching people. Every time I see someone join any of the Discords that we're both in, I always ping them to you. If they're from Australia, I was expecting you to. Well, I mean, if you got a couple of people into the refugees from Australia and then started flying, you'd probably be the most people doing the most flying in the refugees quite quickly, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Look, it's one of those things where it's a bit of a hard sell to be like, hey, I know you're in this community that's in your time zone with people that, you know, have the same accent as you, but do you want to come to this other server where you can fly at 4 a.m. with people with completely different cultural backgrounds and are all a bit wacky? Like, it can be a bit hard to sort of convince people, but we do have some people, like I've got my eye on 1 or 2 people who I'm hoping to maybe get through the training and get involved so we can start having a couple of people turn up in the Asian Oceanic region, because it'd be nice. But
yeah, I'm all for it. Like, we started doing the occasional what's it, like, sort of 9 a.m. UK time flights that were a little bit easier for you on a Saturday, sort of
right now, pretty much.
Like pretty much right now. So no reason why we couldn't do that again. I think it's probably, I mean, if we did that on the refugees, because you had a few people in there who were willing to do that from your end, I think it would work out. We'd probably get more people than we expected.
Yeah. I'm definitely gonna organize some stuff soon, especially when the Phantom comes out. I'm really keen, so I want to get in there.
Keen on the Phantom?
Yes, I am. I even bought a little model kit. Oh, you're on the ball, mate. Ready to go. 2 weeks.
Well, first of all, 2 weeks. Yeah, I made a prediction on the podcast for the 15th, which is 2 weeks. It's a week on Wednesday, so last Wednesday it was 2 weeks. Because I thought it was wise to pick a Wednesday, but as we found out, the whole ED update schedule went out the window pretty quick. You know, it wasn't going to be every like 6 weeks on a Wednesday, like we kind of expected. Because what have we just found? What has just come out?
The Cola map, right?
The Cola terrain
by Orbex, which I'm familiar with their products from Microsoft Flight Simulator, but not DCS. Okay. I don't think they've done anything for DCS, have they?
I think this is the first. I've got to say, I was a little bit confused when the link for it sent you to their website.
Oh, does it?
I thought it was going to be this. I was like, what are we? Have ED started allowing third parties to sell things through other marketplaces? And the answer is no, or at least you can buy it, or maybe you have to buy it from digital DCS.com, whatever it is, as normal. But it is a bit strange. I mean, obviously, it's like you say, it's someone coming in from a different community. How do you feel about it? How do you feel about that terrain?
I'll be completely honest. I had to figure out where Cola was when it was first announced. I was like, where the hell is this?
That's fair.
But I'm not super, like, just for background, like I'm interested in all things planes and military history and stuff, but I'm not super knowledgeable. So I think when I first heard Cola, I realize now that it's like a sort of Eastern European kind of, possible Cold War type of thing. Maybe obviously now modern stuff given recent events.
And this is their website. If we look at products, it's not even. They don't have a DCS section, so I don't think you can buy it from. But that gives you an idea of their sort of pedigree, as it were. Clearly, they've been quite busy in these other areas.
And look, in terms of like the quality, I'm hearing that it's unfinished, sort of, I guess you could say. But overall, their products have been pretty good as far as I can tell in Microsoft Flight Simulator. I think I've bought one or two of their stuff a while ago for some of the older iterations, I think. But yeah, look,
You've given them money.
I'm thinking about it. Because I think it's nice to look at a map that isn't desert anymore, which I think is a common sentiment across the community. No sand anymore, please.
We do see a lot of sand and not very many trees. We'll come to trees in a minute because trees is part of the controversy. I don't know if you've heard about that.
No, I don't think I have.
So I'll say we'll come to it in a minute, but if you haven't heard, I'll tell you.
Okay. Yep.
People are saying that it's the wrong trees. There should be pine trees, and they haven't used pine trees, which is perhaps something to do with canopy coverage. Like, if the tree is narrower, you need more of them to cover a given area. And as we know, there's like some problem with DCS and terrains where it's a limit to how many objects you can have. The tree counts as an object. The more trees you have, the more. That's why the Marianas was such a problem when it first came out. Because the whole thing was covered in palm trees.
Yeah. Okay. Literally unplayable if the tree types are right.
Yeah, people are saying it looks really nice in the areas around cities and airfields where it's done.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm talking from second-hand perspective. Or third-hand accounts here, and there are areas where it's not done. Like,
I heard there was the labels where town should be, but then no town, things like that. Some of the stuff I read, and some of the textures might have been a bit wonky, especially with the mountains and stuff. But
how do you feel about the space, the terrain, because it's up there, the sort of Scandinavian or I can't remember which country it is, bordering on Russia. It's Cold War kind of, or I guess present kind of tensions and that sort of thing. How do you feel about that?
It's like Finland, Norway, Sweden, Russia kind of area, right? Look, it has potential. Like, it sounds like it could be good. It's just, it's as with all DCS maps. It's like, how much is this thing? Is everyone going to have it? Is it worth getting? Like, I find, for me personally, I didn't get the South Atlantic map for the same reason, which is, man, it looks nice, but when am I ever going to play on it? So it's one of those things where it's sort of, you got to wait and see whether or not the community picks it up as one of the big ones you have to get. Like Syria. And maybe Persian Gulf. Obviously, Caucasus is free, so that's one of them. But there's like a set of kind of the handful of maps that, if you were going to get into the game, you'd pick up just for the sake that, like 85% of the content, like of servers and what people do missions on, is going to be on those maps. So it's like, for me, because of the price of entry, it's sort of, it has to prove itself to be worth it, I guess, before I would want to put the money down. But as a map, it looks great, and it sounds like a good opportunity for like some interesting scenarios and stuff. It's just, are people going to use it? It's the question.
I agree with you. I've spoken about that in the past on a different episode, and my criteria for a map is, does it look nice, and are people I know playing it?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it could, like I said this, it could be a map on Mars. If it's reasonably nice to look at and all my friends are playing it, I'll probably get it and then play it. So that is one of the arguments for why it probably shouldn't have. It should have probably stayed in the oven a little bit longer, because that one. There we go. So these are screenshots from someone in the refugees, and you can kind of see like a funky, funky texture area on the left there. Again, nice terrain. Question mark on the textures. Similar. It looks a bit splodgy fjord. I mean, the terrain itself looks fun to fly around low level. Yeah. But if there's like a critical mass it has to reach as a product in the community, enough people have to buy it that it's going to feature on public servers of a certain size. It's going to, if I'm a mission maker, and I'm thinking about making a mission on a map, and it needs more than, it needs a certain amount of people, then I have to be relatively sure. For me to put the effort in to make the mission, I have to be reasonably sure I can get that many people to play it. And if my group, 2 people own the map, well, that's how many people I can make it for, which, for some people, 2-person mission, it's fine. You can have plenty of fun doing that. But for larger groups, you're going to take up a whole evening just to have 2 people go out and do that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it does. I guess it surprises me a little bit that like Eagle Dynamics hasn't kind of thought about that a bit more, and kind of, it feels like it's perfect for that kind of, I don't know what you would call it, but when you get a video game and you kind of like, you get part of the video game for free, but then you have to buy the rest of it to kind of like continue, and if all your friends are playing it, you're more likely to buy it. I feel like that's kind of perfect situation for this, where if you had
just like a ticket, we're all going to this show, we're all going to go and see this artist. Okay, you're going, I'll come, buy a ticket.
Yeah. If you had a low resolution version of all of these maps, people could still come and fly in missions. But if you do enough missions on that map, someone might go, well, you know what? Like, I want it to not look like dog shit. I'll buy the map, or something like that. Or I want to, unlock some particular features that I'd like to have, or something. Like that. It feels like it's a missed opportunity a little bit. Just paywalling people out of maps that won't be bought because because everyone knows that no one will buy it and play it. You know what I mean? Like, you're kind of, by locking it off, you're effectively neutering your sales a little bit. Whereas if it was a little bit more, I see
what you're getting at. Like, every time if there was one map, which originally it was Caucasus, then everyone would play that map, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
And then 2 maps, you've now split the community between people who own it and don't.
Yeah.
And every time you add that, it's like a Horcrux, isn't it? You're splitting yourself, you're dividing yourself up into these different bits where, if I join a group, let's go back to your example of trying to find a group that fits you in Australia, in that time zone. Well, if you joined one and they were all great, but they all flew South Atlantic, you'd probably get that map. But and if you're in a group, and conversely, if you're in a group and no one flies anything but Syria, you buy that map and nothing else.
Yeah,
and then that becomes a barrier to changing around. And I think you raise a good point. I think if and when 2 weeks, right, we get the DCS world, low poly world, then that changes things substantially. And what do you think? Do you think that would increase sales? Like, let's say for example, I don't have to buy Cola to go and fly over Cola.
Yeah.
But I do have to buy cola to get the definition at the low level, or see the textures to a certain level. And with that, then create an incentive for me, you know, if because that person who doesn't want to make a mission for cola and have 20 people, 30 people, 40 people, like, they can do it, and we can all join in, and some of us won't see it, and they didn't think that would happen enough, and then I would start to go, maybe I'll buy it, maybe I'll like to see it in that high def.
Well, it works for Microsoft Flight Simulator, right? Like they have.
Well, tell us about that, because I don't know much about that marketplace.
Okay. Well, so the Microsoft Flight Simulator, the latest one, I'm a bit out of the loop. I haven't played MSF for a while, but when it initially came out, the newer one, the idea was that the whole world was kind of there. You could fly anywhere. All the airports were there. All of the terrain was there. All the cities were there, and it just relied on, I think it was Bing's Google, their version of Google Maps, basically, to populate the world with terrain textures and 3D data. Some of the cities were actually in 3D. Newcastle here in Australia was, and I flew around and actually blown away by how.
Wrong Newcastle.
Yes, yeah. New Newcastle. But yeah, like, so they did a really good job. But of course, because it's essentially auto-generated through satellite imagery and terrain map data and stuff like that, it's not 100% accurate. And so there's an in-game marketplace where you can buy a whole bunch of different things by different developers. It obviously includes planes. That's the obvious one. But also parts of the world that someone has gone in and essentially done a more detailed, specific job on. And it's generally airports, but it could be areas of the world. There are packs that kind of update, you know, a lot of VFR related things you might see flying around Europe. You know, they've made it so that all of Europe has the right power poles or street lamps and stuff like that. So it's easier for you to navigate if you were practicing, say, in the game for real life or something. So I think Orbex does a lot of work on individual airports, especially around the world, and it's like $15-20 and you can get this airport. So if you're flying out of this airport all the time, because maybe you do that in real life and you're practicing, or maybe it's your hometown, or it's a place that you really like and you want to fly in and out of there all the time, you spend a bit of cash and you get an even better version of that, a more accurate, nicer looking version of that.
Yeah. So as an example, this is Orbix UK Southeast, which costs 22.49 Australian dollars, or nearly 15 US dollars, nearly 14 euros, nearly 12 quid. And that gets you quite a lot of ships. We got the Enterprise? I don't remember which one that is.
So so Microsoft Flight Simulator tries to put in like different traffic. So in this case, like there's default sea traffic, so like, cruise ships and yachts and stuff like that. But they're all very simple, basic, and they're not very accurate. So this is an example of a product where it'll update kind of the areas and it'll have more accurate ships in it.
Oh, it's just vessels.
Yeah,
I was thinking this was a terrain. I was trying to get a comparison between DCS terrains and MSF terrains, but this is just sea. This is just ships.
There is a comparison. It's supercarrier. So you have the default aircraft carrier in DCS, which is fine. It works, but doesn't have deck crew. It doesn't have the hand signals. It doesn't have all the fancy, stuff. But you can buy an upgrade that makes the ship more cool. It adds in the deck crews and the launching and all that sort of stuff, right? This is basically that version of it. That's the one thing in DCS they did in this way that I think works, because people go, yeah, cool, I want the cool aircraft carrier thing, especially if everyone else is using it, because they're all taken off and they can see all the people doing the hand signals and all that sort of stuff. Like that's basically this in a nutshell. But I think they should do it for maps as well, is my point. I think that if we had this DCS world thing where we could just fly anywhere, that's cool, because then you could do a mission wherever you wanted, and it would be sort of low detail but still fine kind of terrain that you could just deal with. But then if you wanted a more high quality version of that area for a particular reason, then you could buy that. And I think that would I personally think that would increase sales, because if you, as you said, if you had a group that says, cool, I'm going to do a Eastern European campaign, you know, like let's say Russia's invading from the east or something like that, then you could do part of it in the collar area, and you could say, like, if you have the collar terrain, this will look especially good. But if you don't, you can still fly with us. You get 30 people, and maybe 5 of them go, yeah, I want this to look good, and they buy it. Whereas before, you wouldn't even do the mission because no one has the map. So, like, no one would buy it. Maybe one guy would buy it because he likes cola, and that's it. So to me, it makes more sense to do it that way. But I don't know.
No, I agree.
I'm not a salesperson, so
yeah, I think obviously it's a Microsoft Flight Simulator has the advantage of being iterative. Like we're talking about Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, right? It's 2020.
Yeah, 2020.
And they're already talking about 2024. I think the next one is coming, and they're saying that your purchases, some of it's going to be like transferable.
Yeah,
which is great. Over. But that's then new architecture. It's a new game, plausibly with a new engine or an updated engine. Whereas we are dealing with DCS, we're dealing with a non. It's iterative in some way in that you have DCS 1.7, like all that sort of stuff. Yeah. But they're not. They're improving, they're upgrading rather than replacing. So the job of turning around and saying, okay, we'll have a world and do it, it's they have to squeeze that into the existing game rather than making a new game with a new feature.
Yes, it's a bit
which
of
is
a challenge,
a lot of the reason why we're dealing with it. So this is Orbix Great Britain Central. Which apparently has Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, Salford, Sheffield, Blackpool, Newcastle, which is probably, I'd say that's pretty comparable.
Old Newcastle. Yeah.
Old Newcastle, yeah. Do I still have the, not still have the map up, but that is this much money, $20 US. 20 Australian dollars, $12 US, 12 euros, 10 quid.
You can see how well the currency is doing right now. Anyway,
yeah. I'm trying to mentally put that in comparison to DCS. I think that's a small area than we're used to for a DCS map, but that is cities. I mean, this is the advantage of the newer engine. Like they can put lots and lots of detailed cities in and not have the game do 2 frames a second. So that's a bit of a toss up there, but that's also probably about a half to a third of the price of a DCS map.
Yeah, but the reason for that is that you can fly over London and all these cities and stuff like that in the base game, and it will look okay. That you can do it, and the airports will be there, and all the specific points of interest will probably be there. This is like an upgrade to that to make it look even better, make it look really nice. And even then, like I think when this came out, one of the, I think it might have been the London one. I remember there being a bit of controversy because it didn't look as good as people thought it would. They were actually like, I think this looks worse or something like that. I'm not sure if it was Orbex or someone else that did it.
Right.
But someone released. Yeah, someone released an updated pack for I remember London because they were showing off all the different landmarks of London. I think it was London, and it looked possibly worse than the original. And everyone was like, "What? Why am I paying $20 to make it look worse?" But that's the idea, though. It's meant to go in and kind of make it look nicer. Whereas in DCS, you just don't get it at all. So it's kind of like, it's that's the reason why. It's because they want to, without it, you're not playing at all. So
yeah, I wonder if it makes a difference
I say that with air quotation marks, but anyway.
Yeah, I wonder if it makes a difference what we do in DCS, because like I should be able to jump into one of the more modern jets and pre-plan some JDAM strikes to a specific 10 square meters. But you don't do any of that in Microsoft Flight Simulator, do you? You can fly high or low and land. And that's it, really, isn't it? Microsoft Flight Simulator.
I think so. Yeah, I think there's some mods and third-party things that can let you do missions, which but that's essentially like land in the circle or hover over an area or something like that. But
I think there's an air-to-ground radar. It's synthetic aperture radar in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Is there? I don't know how much of this is to do with what what the aircraft makers are doing, and it has nothing to do with the terrain, or is that something that terrain makers in DCS have to take into account?
Yeah, not sure, but I think for Cola, I think for me personally, until I see a reason otherwise, it's going to be a miss. But there are certain maps coming out eventually that I think are going to be added into that list of must-haves. Like, for example, Afghanistan and Iraq, I think are going to be far more enticing because of the obvious like potential of those maps to be great areas for certain campaigns or scenarios, historical stuff. Whereas Cola, it's like there's nothing really there that happens per se that was super interesting. Meanwhile, you look at Afghanistan or Iraq, and it's like, cool, I have multiple wars of scenarios to be able to create and work on, and it's
well, apart from Vietnam and where you live, what is there in terms of like a unifying like map that you definitely get? Like there's always going to be even I kind of agree with you when you say about Iraq and Afghanistan, but I've heard people say the opposite, so they don't give a damn about Afghanistan, and the classic...
but if half the community is playing on it because half of them really like it, then they'll be forced to, won't they? Like that's kind of the part of the conversation, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I guess what I'm driving at is that it's the Horcrux example again. Every map splits the community and requires gigabytes and gigabytes, hundreds of gigabytes of data and money. And every time,
sorry to interrupt. So I think someone raised a good point on the Reddit, on the subreddit yesterday. I think it was. They were saying that obviously DCS is a game, but I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Eagle Dynamics, a lot of their business comes from the military version, right? Like selling it to certain militaries, presumably. The thought process was, well, you might want to focus on particular areas in that case. If you've got an area, like for example, the Northern Australian thing. When I first saw that, I sort of went, what? Because like, cool, like Australia, that's where I live, great. But then I'm like, no one's going to play that. No one in the game is going to go there. And I thought, why are they even bothering? And then I remembered, it's basically when Australia and America do exercises together, this is where they do it. They go to the top end of Australia.
This was what I was wondering about as well. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure this is like the Nevada test training range down under.
The Australian NTTR.
A huge bit of nothing that you guys, like you said, you go out and you can run a couple of timelines without having to dodge around airliners. That was what I thought it was. I think it's this. I think it's around here, right? Am I getting this right?
I'm not too, it's been a while since I looked it up. I'm not too sure, but Northern Territory is the bit on the right there, which I believe is where most of it is. But it's all across. Like Australia as a landmass, I think like 80% of the country is
we'd literally just cut it north south. Is that what we?
It could be. I'm not too sure. But
no, when I say we, I mean like I mean like the British Empire. We just we just chop off the western bits. Everything south of Coonawarra is everything west of Coonawarra is the Western Territory. Is that what happened?
I guess so. Yeah. I don't know. But I say there's no one there, but there's a lot of stuff. It's just like it's very empty, and I like Australia comparatively is about the same size as the United States. But something like 80% of our population is on the eastern coast.
You're all down here, aren't you?
Yep. So that whole area in the middle, basically everywhere that isn't green, is very, very empty. So
it makes sense.
We do a lot
of you need green to live.
Yeah, so it's very hot and not much going on. But unlike America, where they're spread out the entire thing and there's not a single space that isn't occupied by someone or something, we don't really have that. So yeah, I think they use the desert.
Like this bit is quite empty, but the rest of it is as you say, full of people. That's what, like, almost 400 million. What's the rough population of Australia?
We have about 40 million, I think. 30, 40 million.
So that's even less than the UK. I think the UK is like 70 million, which is astounding when you consider the difference in landmass.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, so it's one of those things where it's like, cool, that's where I live, but I'm not going to buy it. Like, no one's going to play on it. Not even the Australians. All the Australian groups were like, why on earth would we buy this? Like,
that's what I was going to ask you, actually. So even even the community that you're not just yourself, the people you spoke to say that they don't care.
Because there's like, it comes down to like, what are you going to do? And it's kind of, I would go back to your thing earlier where you said like the two things that make you want to buy a map. I would add an extra third one onto that, which is, what are you going to do on it? What's the possibilities or the potentials of that map? For example, the South Atlantic map makes more sense to buy than Kola because you could do Falklands stuff there. You know, Kola might be good for a Cold War fanboy or someone who's interested in maybe the stuff that's going on in Ukraine because it's a bit closer to that.
But it's like, what am I? Terrible screenshot. That is
wonderful.
The rough area. So from these these islands down to someplace beginning with B. I'll see if I can zoom in that far on.
Yeah, so it starts at like Darwin, and then I don't know many places top left in Australia, to be honest.
Beginning with B. So it's about that.
Yeah,
that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, what am I going to do in there? I guess training exercises. Yeah, like I don't know.
Is there a flag down there? Is there like a kangaroo flag? Crocodile flag? Like red flag, maple flag?
Oh, right, yeah. I mean, yeah, maybe roo flag. I guess I don't know what they call it, but the Americans come over and they do exercises out there, so I don't know what they call it. But yeah, like
on the plus side, there's this AUKUS thing happening, which is you know, if you're I don't know what company's making this, but you're probably watching that with great interest because it makes that sort of thing more relevant. Or it could make these things more relevant, but I still, you know, I'm not saying that it's night and day change. It just makes it slightly more interesting. If all of a sudden, you know, Brits, Americans, and Australians start doing more and more together, it could happen down here, I suppose.
Yeah, but again, it's just more training stuff. Like the reason I think Iraq and Afghanistan are going to pop off is because it's probably the most it's probably got the most potential of any map that could come out. It's had so many interesting conflicts there and stuff. Syria is, I personally think the reason Syria is used quite a lot is because it's high quality, and two, you know, there's stuff happening there. It's, you know, there's cool missions and ideas you can come up with and scenarios, and
even like something that I think it might have been Klasno. Who was a frequent member of the Strike Eagle Discord, and I think he was a Wizzo, but he was aircrew. He flew the thing. He did the stuff, right?
Yeah.
And he would comment basically. There's a place for this, but what his opinion on like training stuff, like doing a red flag, for example, he was like, "No, we do red flags because we can't go and like fight people." Like there's not a war on, you know, that obviously red flag, do 10 missions, survive better, etc. But you know, there's a reason they do training rules, and it's because they're not actually shooting at people. Whereas in DCS, because you know, if they did, there'd be you know, if two American fighter groups went at each other with live weapons, there'd be a lot of dead American pilots, wouldn't there? You know, an aircrew. Whereas we don't have to care about that. Like, why would? His argument was, and I think there's some credence to it, apart from when it comes to like really simming things, like you can just go and really fight some MiGs. Like you can just go and bomb some bit in Syria, and you know, and go up against an SA-10. Like, and if you get shot down, that's fine. Just, you know, Control R and start again. You know, so that was, you know, the argument against training areas, or in this context, it was really like the flying in a training manner, like replicating a, taking training bombs. I think that was the real thing he was bearing down on. Like, why are you taking training bombs? We do it because it's cheaper, and but in DCS, it really doesn't make a difference at all. If you take who cares how bad the smoke bombs are? That because just take a real bomb in DCS, real bomb. You know what I mean? Take a bomb that explodes in DCS. So I wonder if that's sort of similar. And why would you need? What difference is it? You can't train over Syria if you're in the RAF because they might get mad and shoot you. Like in DCS, you can. So what is the use of a training area? That's one of the arguments. Now, personally, I think a lot of people like simulating the training stuff because to some degree we are LARPing as pilots. We are LARPing as aircrew, live action role playing as these things. So it's fun to do a red flag and follow all those rules because it's a challenge and because it's interesting and because we're kind of pretending to be fighter pilots. But to some degree, when it comes to I do own NTR and I do enjoy it, but when it comes to this territory, unless you're really LARPing as someone training over Australia, what is the use? And then
unless they're gonna sell it to the Australian military to train their pilots, or something.
In which case it's a step above LARPing, isn't it? that's
then
actual being.
Yeah, you practice the op you're about to do tomorrow on the sim, and then you go out and do it. So you follow the procedures, you do all the stuff, you take off from the right airbase. So that to me makes more sense. So if they're doing that in the background, that explains it. But from a gaming perspective, I don't. And just to respond to that idea of you just go out and drop a bomb. It's I think people should go and do whatever they find fun. So if you want to go out and drop training bombs and pretend you're doing training, then if it's fun, go do it.
That's the permanent counter argument, isn't it? It's just play the game however you want to play it.
Exactly, yeah. But he's coming from a perspective of having done it in real life. Well, maybe someone wants to have a go at that and they can't because they're not a fighter pilot, so they want to go and drop some training bombs and go see how it was, how it is, how you might want to do it. So I don't know. I get his point, but at the same time, it's as you said, it's sometimes fun to role play or LARP, or however you want to call it, doing this stuff because one, it's interesting. Doing. I think the argument as well I would make is that it's different from what you would normally do, so it's something interesting. For our little red flag things that we've done, as part of our group, for example, there's an extra layer of timing and takeoff orders and where the range is, and it's just a different interesting experience that it can be fun and spices things up a bit. But anyway, to come back to the point, I think certain maps to me have less appeal because even though they may be pretty and even though maybe people even might want to play on them, what are you actually going to be doing on them? What's the cool thing I can do on this map compared to another map? And it's on Iraq, I can, do the flight over Baghdad at night with the AAA coming up. But in the Australian map, I can bomb a range that they would in real life and then go home. It's just, for me, it's at least for me, that's the sort of thought process I go through.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if you look at a game like you Call of Duties, like your more arcadey games, they have a lot of maps or you still call them a map. It doesn't matter. No one's jumping into a Call of Duty run around 360 no scope kind of deathmatch game and being oh, this is the wrong part of Fallujah. No one no one cares. Whereas for us, it's a bit different. We do care about. Some people like to replicate things. Some people like to make up brand new things. But the type of place is a significant choice usually. I think the more we talk about it, the more I think we do need that world map. It would just.
I think it would open up things significantly. I think it would improve the community and the kind of cohesiveness of it quite a bit. I would think,
especially if
make
it's
ED more money.
core.
So,
if it's part of the core game, you don't have to buy it. Like maybe they, I don't know, maybe they stopped giving out caucuses. I don't know, because caucuses is old and it's got a lot of problems. But then it would also open up the game to so many more people. Like if there's people going like, you know, my friend plays DCS, it sounds great, I really want to give it a go, but they fly on Syria and pick another map, and then they fly in the F-15E and they fly in this, and I need to, that's like 150 quid, 200 quid.
Yeah, just to get in. Yeah, like I've got friends who I convinced to buy stuff when it was on sale. Yeah, and they played it a couple of times, they haven't touched it since, and it's like, and then it's like a new plane comes out, and it's like, cool, I'm not doing that anymore. I've moved on to the Strike Eagle or whatever. It's like we could fly together, but you know, I'm going to be flying something else, and you know, it's like a mismatch. I think the planes should do it as well. I think if you have a 2-seater plane, you should be able to hop in the back of someone else's and be able to use it without having paid for it, like the IL-2 thing. I think they do that.
Yeah, it's about sort of pennies and pounds, isn't it? Like, do you want to make 1,000,000 pennies or 1,000 pounds? Like, I don't do the math on that, but you see what I'm saying. Like, you can, if you make something, there's probably a curve you want to sit on a certain point on, where you're selling so much of something, you're making the maximum amount of money, where you can make it more expensive but you'll sell less. You can make it cheaper and you'll sell more but make less per sale. So anything about, it's about, especially with DCS, which is complicated, it's not simple, it takes a lot to get your head around. Like, you don't want to have someone questioning their purchase because they're banging their head against the wall, you know. And so, like in your example of a 2-seater, that would be a solution to that, or to some degree a solution, because you can sit in with somebody and they can take you through things. So
if there's one thing we know from mobile games and gacha games and all the stuff that's been coming out recently, is you got to get people hooked and then they'll buy stuff. You can't expect them to buy stuff and then get hooked. So
get them in the door, shiny things. Level up, ping, 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 ping. Oh, now you got to pay us £5. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and you go, yeah, fine, whatever. I just spent the last hour doing this, so I feel like you deserve it. You know, I've got £5 lying around. Fuck it. That's how it works these days. But yeah, like saying to someone, yeah, you can come and do this really cool thing with me, and it only costs you $120. You're like, and I don't think I'm not sure if I'll even enjoy it yet. Like, that's a hard sell, and not many people are gonna do that. As opposed to, hey, hop in download this game, hop in the back, and I'll teach you how to do it, and we can fly around for a bit for free.
I mean, with something like the F-15, you could just say, come and sit and watch. I can do it all from the front. Like, just come and get motion sick.
Come sit in the plane, like, exactly. And we've got more, you know, now we've got, obviously, the F-15, the Phantom's coming out in 2 weeks. There's a bunch of, and the
May
Apache,
15th,
there's a bunch.
Heard it here first.
Yep. Levo's got the scoop.
When's your prediction? We have to get that on file.
Well, the problem is I predicted at end of April, so I'm
is it already gone? Okay, fair enough.
But if I had to do it now, I'd say I don't know the DCS update release schedule very much, but by the sounds of it, I don't need to.
I thought it was Wednesdays, but apparently not.
I'll say the 20. What did you say? The 15th.
I said the 15th, which is a week on Wednesday.
I'll do the 16th then to do the dirty maneuver.
I mean, that's the logical way to go, isn't it? Later rather than sooner.
Yeah. But yeah, we've got at least 3 aircraft now that are all very cool, or gonna have anyway. And there's a Tomcat as well, so there's 4. Where you've got a 2-seater. You got, I think, I'd say the majority of people flying around with no one in the back seat because they haven't been able to convince their mates to hop on, or their friend that does play DCS isn't around right now, and it's like, it feels like a lost opportunity to get people in the door, and then, you know, like convert that into a sale. It feels to me.
They've got. I think we need to give these Eagle Dynamics credit for the work they've done, because it has changed a lot in the at least in DCS terms. It's changed a lot in the past like 5 years, in positive ways, and I think they're turning the tanker around. You know what I mean? Like, they're turning circles like 50 nautical miles. So I think we can be optimistic about the future, and I think they want to be pragmatic, but their ability to make change to takes a long time. So I think we can look forward to a future that might be like that. But I think that the technical debt, like, you know, they're gonna the list of stuff they're working on, all the stuff that we've been braying about for ages, like supercarry updates, Vulkan, and all this other sort of stuff. Like, we're starting to, well, that stuff's still in the future. The multi-threading and the DLSS, you know, that stuff is occurring, and lighting updates and stuff. Like, we if you went back, like, I think 2 years, you'd see all this stuff being like speculated about, and people saying, "Oh, I can't wait for that to happen." So if you go 2 years on from when they announced they were going to do Vulkan, that's about when we're going to see Vulkan. If you go 2 years on from when they said they're going to do the next thing, that's probably when we'll see it. But we're always wrapped up in the latest thing that they're sort of speculating about.
It's funny you mentioned 2 years. I had a work colleague back when I worked at the government who said to me one day, if you want to see anything changed from the ground up, like from the day that it is put forward as a thing you should do to the day that it comes out, 2 years is the average. Now, if you're a more that was in the old, I don't want to get too in the weeds with technical business shit, because this is supposed to be a fun podcast, but that was using the old sort of waterfall methodology of like web development, software development. Agile these days, you can release things quicker, which I think is actually what ED is moving more towards now as well. They're releasing stuff as small chunks, small updates and stuff like that. But the general rule, I guess, is that once you start making something big, a big change or something, and you're working at that kind of standard kind of, all right, we're going to finish it and then release it, 2 years is usually, from what I'm told, a good bet. It takes a long time for something to get legs, and then to get approval, get worked on, get resources assigned, get tested.
That's a good guess then. Good guess.
So yeah, I'd say it's pretty accurate.
Okay, well, let's move ourselves to turn this tank around towards an ending. I'm experimenting. This is all an experiment, by the way. This could go away like next time, although I am enjoying it, and I think I'll continue. But to continue the experimental concept, what I'm experimenting with now is a particular final question that I'll ask every new person that comes on. And the final question is, what do you love to do?
What do I love to do?
Yeah. You can think about it for a minute. So I think it's a good question because it'll sort of bring out the spark in people when they start talking about what they love to do. I'm filling time while you're thinking about it because I didn't prepare you for this.
Man, you put me on the spot. It's difficult because I'm the kind of person that will say one thing one week and then another the other week. Like, my interests, the things I like doing and love doing, change pretty regularly. I'm one of those people that chases hobbies like they're going out of style. But I know it's very very generic, but I'm gonna have to say, like, flying with a good group in DCS is something that I think is when it happens, it's a highlight of my week. Like, it's definitely something that I find really enjoyable, especially when everything works and everything goes well. Like, pulling off something really fun and interesting and cool with a bunch of friends. I really like doing that. And yeah, I mean, that's the first thing that came to my head when you asked that question. So I'm just trying to think, is there anything else that I love that isn't DCS to give you a more interesting answer?
There's no right or wrong answer. There's no criteria, and I think it's important that it is entirely your answer. And I think that's a great answer. And to a large point, I agree with you. I think that's when I love winning in DCS because we knew a bit more, or a bit more practiced, or we had a bit of better sort of tactics in common. Like that, I love a high skill ceiling, which DCS definitely has. And yeah, no, I agree with you there. I think that is because it's usually there we go. It's usually quite late for me when we play, usually early for you, but I'm pretty much wrapping up the mission, debriefing, and then going to bed. And then I will, if it's really good or really bad, sometimes I'll have trouble sleeping because I'm sort of debriefing it over and again in my head, thinking, you know, either this bit went, yeah, that was good, and that was cool, you know. So I think it's a good answer.
Yeah, it's one of those hobbies which I see as a very good thing, where if it goes well, you're buzzing afterwards because you just, you know, you're kind of like, wow, like that was awesome. You know, there's nothing quite like what you just did, and it was, you know, like puts a smile on your face for the rest of the day. If it goes badly, it's the opposite. You're like, oh, God damn it! Like what? Like I know sometimes I've, you know, finished out a mission with the group and sort of, you know, had to take a while to cool off because I was so annoyed with myself for making a stupid mistake.
Occasionally, rage quit happens.
Yeah, and it's like, I see that as a good thing because it means that it's engaging enough to get you to that point. You know what I mean? It's not obviously, you know, it's not fun to get angry at video games, but it happens occasionally because you're passionate about it. I think that's a really good thing. And and the more you practice and the more you do, the less likely that happens as well. Which means
the feature of a high skill ceiling means you can probably identify what went wrong and then work to improve on that area. It's not like, this guy was a level 80 and I'm a level 60, so he just had better hits and hit points than I did. You know, it's if someone killed you, you can usually figure out as to why, and then in the future either negate it or beat them at that.
It's also less gamified as well. Like a lot of video games, I've played some competitive first-person shooters in the past, like Rainbow Six Siege, Escape from Tarkov, things like that. And I find them fun, but I also find them very frustrating because at the end of the day, it's a video game. So you're meant to be, it's designed so that everyone kind of has the same playing field. Whereas in real life, if you're flying a plane or something like that, you might not have that. You know, you might be in an F-18 versus an F-5, and if you're in the F-5, well, good luck. There's no, you know, evening out of anything just because it's a video game. It's a simulation. So you have that kind of like, it's not gamified in that way, which to me is more fun because then, you know, if I'm going up against someone in a comparable plane, you know, it's not just a case of, okay, well, we're equal, therefore, you know, this is how it's going to go. It's like if I do something interesting or if I figure out a way to approach this differently, I could actually win.
And then make a mistake and you capitalize on
plane. It. Yeah, if I'm in a lower quality plane, then maybe I have to change the way I fight because this isn't going to be even. You know, I have to do something different. And then on top of that, it's like you learn the stuff of how to play the game, and then you sort of go away and you're like, oh, I actually now legitimately know more about something that is, you know, applicable to, you know, real life, I guess, if you were into history or military stuff. I mean, going to see Top Gun, having just been through the stuff we did, which is obviously, you know, stuff we found on the internet, you know, watching Top Gun Maverick, the new one in the cinema, sitting there going, oh, I know what that is. I know what's going on. That's a funny little thing. They wouldn't do it like that. It's fun. It adds an extra layer to the enjoyment as well, I think, is when it's real to a degree. I know DCS is an approximation. It's not perfect, but you get what I mean. Like,
yeah, no, that's a great answer. I'll stick that question in, but I'll probably give people a heads up that it's coming.
Well, no, now, won't they?
If they get an hour and 50 into this podcast, they'll know.
I'll know.
Right. Well, thank you very much for your time. And it's evening there, isn't it? So I hope you have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for participating in my ongoing experiment, and I look forward to maybe flying with you again in the near future.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks for having me on, and yeah, fingers crossed you can fly. When the Phantom comes out on the 15th or the 16th,
I'm going pretty hard. Is it a Wizzo or a Rio? It's a Rio, isn't it?
Is it? Yeah, I think it is. It's a Rio.
Backseat. I'm keen on the back seat there. I'll fly a little bit if I have to, like, but it's the same as the F-14 for me, really. Like, I'm much more interested in those systems.
Yeah, cool.
All right, well, hopefully that doesn't take too. Hopefully, 15th of May then, or the 16th of May, we'll be making space in our hard drives for yet another module.
Fingers crossed.
All right. Thanks for listening, listeners. If you did make it this far, you get a gold star, and we'll see how easy this was to upload, and if it was good, I'll be putting some money down to the old SteamYard. I'll be getting onto my friend Dogma here to make me some nice backgrounds and and banners and all that other sort of stuff. All right, cheers,
Excellent.
everybody.
Bye.